Let me give you a little bit of my background. I am a citizen of Canada, currently living in the United States. I have a master's degree in biochemistry from the University of California in Berkeley. And during my career, I have created and run 4 university-based technology transfer organizations. 2 of them were in the United States, 2 of them were in Canada. 2 of the 4 were run on a for-profit basis, 2 of them on a not-for-profit basis. During my career, I was also a vice president of a private venture capital investment company, investing in university startup companies. I recently retired from my 4th office, which was at Florida State University in Tallahassee, Florida, after creating and running it for 18 years. During that time, as you know, I was elected president of our professional society, AUTM, Autumn. It is the Association of Academic Technology Transfer Professionals, and during that time I traveled the globe talking to people like yourself about academic technology transfer. After retiring, I continued my consulting business and currently have clients in China, Chile and South America, the United States where we live, Serbia, and in the Philippines. My definition of academic technology transfer is that faculty or even graduate students on a campus who are undertaking research realize that part of their research can be applied to solving a real problem. Once there's that realization, the academic technology transfer process begins. The individual who has the idea discloses it in writing because they think they found a solution to a possible problem. And the Office of Technology Transfer, together with the individual on the campus, begins to evaluate and see whether it is interesting enough to pursue. At the end of the day, the activity is such that together the people in the office and the faculty member look for a company that also sees the problem and wants to evaluate whether the proposed invention or solution might be viable as a product for them to sell and offer to society to solve the problem. The folks in the United Kingdom call academic technology transfer knowledge transfer. I happen to think that's an even better term because what this is all about is taking knowledge and information from the campus, transferring it to a company that then believes it can package it into a product that is of use for people. Yes, it is complex, but it's like most human activity. Let me give another example that is complex and yet you manage it every day. Let's say you try and teach your teenage son how to drive a car. That's complex, yet you manage how to do it. It's one of those things that you partially learn by doing. The other example I will give of something that's complex yet very manageable. Think of your own experience of using your computer to set up an internet account. There were lots of steps you had to go through, but at the end, you did it and it started working. Let me explain a bit more about the steps of technology transfer. As is the case in most every country in the world, the ideas or intellectual property or the work product of an employee is owned by the employer. So if someone has an idea, it's owned by the university. Then it becomes something where the university has set up the Office of Technology Transfer to help the faculty member see whether the idea or the invention might be worthwhile developing into a product. So what happens? The the office and the faculty member look into the literature to see if the problem or the solution has been invented before by somebody else. If that's the case, then you move on to the next issue. If it turns out that it is quite unique and you can find nothing in the regular literature or in the patent literature, you think perhaps this is something that should be pursued. So what happens? You then write up the idea. It goes into the office, who then begins an evaluation with the faculty member, as I said, takes a look to see whether there are previous solutions. Let's say there are not. The university with the faculty member can decide to protect it by filing a patent, which is a government grant acknowledging ownership, providing certain rights. Having done that, then it becomes an activity of looking for and finding a company that has the idea that the problem that you think you might have solved, they're very interested in solving it and offering a solution based on your technology. So finding the company is very difficult. It takes quite some time, but eventually you find someone that says, yes, I think you have something of great interest to me. You negotiate a relationship and decide to find out how together to develop a product. The faculty member and the office will assist the company, and as the company begins to understand it, there's less help needed from the university. Let's say this works. I'll give you an example. I have here, this is a drink coaster, okay? Fundamentally, what happened at one of my former universities is that a microscopist took pictures of interesting liquids under the microscope. And what they found out, this happens to be a picture of white wine. There was no problem to be solved. It just seemed like an interesting idea that might have a market. And so the inventor and the university looked for a company who then said, this is very interesting, we would like to use the images you find and put them on neckties and sell the neckties. Then the university and the company reached a relationship that transferred to the company the legal right to take the risk of developing the technology and the idea into an actual product, which the company would then sell. If this process is successful on this particular technology, and the company is successful in developing a product, and the product is successful in the marketplace, then a small piece of the sales, called a royalty, is then put aside and given back to the university, which then shares it with its employee inventor. I gave the examples of the neckties, and again, I refer to this because once in America, casual days hit and men stopped wearing ties about 10 years ago. And so they stopped buying our neckties, and that was the end of the product. However, a young entrepreneur in our city of Tallahassee came into our office looking for a business opportunity to start a company. I showed him the neckties, and he very cleverly decided that he could take the images and put them into drink accessories, such as coasters like this. So all of a sudden, the technology had another product in the marketplace for another length of time. And again, it was a modest success. The royalties that accrued over sales over a 10-year period amounted to $1 million US. The money came into the university. It was split. The professor invested his money into his laboratory. Seeing this, the university decided it would match his money. So eventually, all of the $1 million went back into furthering research in his laboratory and forming a very virtuous cycle. Another example, this time in Chile, in South America. A professor of mechanical engineering studied earthquakes, and unlike Serbia, Chile is on the ring of fire and is very earthquake prone. So he studied how to protect tall buildings from the earthquakes, and over a 10-year period invented a technology that he himself spun out a small consulting business that then started making hardware products that were sold around the ring of fire. The tallest building in Latin America is in Santiago, Chile, and it has his earthquake damping devices in the basement to protect it. The last one occurs in the Philippines. This is a really interesting one. The Philippines process 100 tons of mango fruit every single day. And roughly 40% of that is waste in terms of the shell and the seeds. And the waste is then dumped in open dump sites where scavengers go through the dump sites looking for things of value. Eventually, a professor at a university in Cebu City in the Philippines decided, she thought this is a terrible waste, and she came up with a process to take the waste product and extract out of it useful things like mango flour for baking, pectin, which is a food additive used around the globe. A local entrepreneur was very intrigued, and he decided, after doing a study, discussing it with the university and their tech transfer office, to acquire the rights to take the process, transfer it, and build a factory. So here are several examples. They're not quite as simple as this, but I wanted to give you examples outside the United States and Canada, because this is happening in other places. One of the problems in the community is that people are indeed looking for the golden egg, the big hit. And quite frankly, from my 40 years experience in the field, the golden eggs are lottery tickets. They happen quite by chance. And when you have one, you're very lucky. And when you don't have one, it's just the luck of the draw, quite frankly. Now, to give some examples, largely in the United States. A study was done by a colleague of mine that showed that 20% of the drugs approved by the United States FDA over a 20-year period, 20% of the drugs were invented with government financing on either a university or at the National Institutes of Health. And when you look at these drugs, they're very well known, very beneficial to people, and all part of the technology transfer of the research on the campus or the NIH into larger companies that developed the drugs and took them into the marketplace. I'll give you another example. This was at my former university, Florida State University. Taxol is an anti-cancer drug. It's used by women in their fight against breast and ovarian cancers. It was discovered in the United States in the late 80s and early 90s, and the American government had a lottery and selected Bristol Myers Squibb to take the idea, the molecule that they found, and develop it into a product. Bristol realized that this product, that's a natural product occurring in pine needles of a certain type of tree, did not exist in large enough quantities to be a viable drug globally. So Bristol put out the word and said to the academic community, this is a real problem. Can you help us synthesize this drug from other materials so that we can make enough to globalize it and help women around the world. The professor at my university discovered such a process. We licensed it to Bristol Myers Squibb and took back a royalty of 4.5%. Taxol's a $1 billion a year drug. And so over a 10-year period, the royalties that came to Florida State were $350 million. Now, that's the big hit. My problem with that was, wait a minute, that's adding a tremendous cost to the patient who's in the bed being treated. So I asked Bristol, what is the real economic impact of our royalty? They did a study and came back and said, John, believe it or not, the royalties that we pay you over a 10-year period amount to only 1/2 of 1 American cent charged to the patient as part of the $600 charged to the patient for the infusion of the drug to battle the cancer. So I was very satisfied that we had created tremendous value that saves a life without adding a cost to the end person who is the patient, where it really matters. And the university enjoyed a cash flow over the 10-year period. Another example, Google. Google was spun out of Stanford University. Nobody was interested in it because nobody understood what the two Google founders were trying to do. So the two inventors asked for the commercial rights. They created a company to create a product to show the world that they had something that would be of value. And the rest is history, as you know.